In the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Mary asks Jesus, "Master, why do the chosen ones suffer torment in their sleep? Why do they wake with terror from visions they cannot name?" Jesus answers with something the church never included in their teachings. When the body sleeps, consciousness loosens from matter, and in that loosening the archons gain access. They cannot reach you fully when you are awake and aware, but in sleep, when your defense is lower, when your consciousness drifts between realms, they enter through the dream gate and feed on your fear. If you wake from nightmares drenched in sweat, heart racing, if you experience sleep paralysis where you feel a presence in the room, if you've been attacked or chased in dreams night after night, comment, "They come in my sleep below," because what you're experiencing isn't random nightmare. That's targeted iconic assault. And the more light you carry, the more frequently you're attacked. Place your hand on your throat right now. That is your dream gate, the energetic point where consciousness exits and enters during sleep. In most people, this gate operates normally. But in chosen ones carrying high-frequency monad consciousness, this gate becomes a target. The archons wait for you to sleep, wait for consciousness to drift, and then they slip through the gate while it's open. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene describes what happens during these attacks. They create visions of terror, scenarios of helplessness, experiences of violation. Not to harm the body remains safe in sleep. They create these visions to generate specific emotional frequencies: fear, shame, powerlessness, despair. And while you experience these emotions in the state, while your consciousness believes the scenario is real, they harvest that frequency like farmers collecting crops. This is why you wake feeling more exhausted than when you went to sleep. You weren't just dreaming, you were being farmed, but Jesus taught us defense protocol. 3 words that, when spoken correctly before sleep, seal the dream gate and make you invisible to archonic intrusion. The Gospel of Mary preserves these 3 words, but they're not in English. They're in Aramaic, and they must be pronounced with specific intention while touching the throat, the dream gate itself. The 3 words create a frequency seal. Think of it like a password protection on your consciousness. When the archons approach your dream gate while you sleep, they encounter the seal, and the seal doesn't just block them, it reflects their intention back toward them. They experience the terror they were planning to create in you. After using this protocol consistently for 7 nights, something permanent shifts. Your dream gate begins to close automatically when you sleep. You still dream, still process, still experience normal sleep consciousness. But the archonic intrusion stops. The nightmares end. The sleep paralysis disappears. The attacks cease. The Gospel of Mary describes what the disciples reported after Jesus taught them this protection. We sleep now without fear. The visions of darkness no longer reach us, and in the morning we wake with energy we did not have before, as if something that was stealing from us nightly has been cut off. Your dreams are supposed to be restorative. They're supposed to be processing time for consciousness, integration time for experience, healing time for the energy body. But when archons intrude, when they turn your dream space into a feeding ground, you wake depleted instead of restored. Your consciousness never gets the rest it requires. Tonight you're learning why chosen ones are specifically targeted during sleep, the mechanics of the dream gate and why it's vulnerable, the 3 Aramaic words Jesus taught for sealing the gate, the specific way to touch your throat while speaking them, and the 7-night protocol, because the first night creates temporary protection, but 7 consecutive nights creates permanent rewiring of how your dream gate operates. Before we go deeper into the mechanics and the practice itself, we need to understand where this knowledge comes from and why most people have never heard of it. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene wasn't discovered until 1896 in Cairo, Egypt, when a German scholar named Karl Reinhardt purchased a 5th century papyrus codex from an antiquities dealer. The codex contained several texts, but the most significant was the Gospel of Mary, a text that had been completely lost to history for over 1,500 years. The manuscript itself is incomplete. Pages 1 through 6 are missing, and pages 11 through 14 are also gone. What we have are fragments, but those fragments contain teachings that fundamentally challenge the understanding of early Christianity that most people hold. The text is written in Coptic, translated from an earlier Greek version, which was itself translated from Aramaic, the language Jesus actually spoke. Each translation creates distance from the original teaching, and certain concepts that were precise in Aramaic become vague or metaphorical in Greek and Coptic. This is particularly true for technical spiritual practices like the Dreamgate sealing. The Church Fathers who determined which texts would be included in the official biblical canon and which would be excluded made their decisions at councils held in the 4th and 5th centuries. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE and subsequent councils established orthodoxy and declared certain texts heretical. The Gospel of Mary was among those excluded, not because it was considered fraudulent, but because it contained teachings that contradicted the power structure the institutional church was building. Mary Magdalene appears in this gospel not as a repentant prostitute. That characterization was a later invention with no biblical basis, but as the disciple who understood Jesus' teachings most deeply, the one to whom he revealed secret knowledge he didn't share with the other disciples. This created an obvious problem for a male-dominated religious hierarchy. If Mary held knowledge the male disciples didn't have, if she was portrayed as more advanced in understanding than Peter or Andrew or John, the entire structure of apostolic succession and male spiritual authority was undermined. But there's a deeper reason this text was suppressed, and it has nothing to do with gender politics. The Gospel of Mary contains operational knowledge. It's not theology, it's not philosophy, it's not moral teaching, it's technical instruction for how consciousness operates, how it's vulnerable, and how to protect it. This kind of knowledge makes individuals spiritually autonomous. If you know how to seal your own dream gate, you don't need a priest to intercede for you. If you understand the mechanics of archonic intrusion, you don't need an institutional authority to protect you from evil. You become your own spiritual technician. The church that was forming in the 4th and 5th centuries was building a system where salvation came through the institution, through baptism administered by priests, through communion controlled by clergy, through confession heard by authorized intermediaries. Personal spiritual techniques that worked independently of institutional mediation were a direct threat to that system. So texts like the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and dozens of others were labelled heretical and systematically destroyed. We only have the Gospel of Mary today because someone in the 5th century buried it in the Egyptian desert, possibly to preserve it from destruction, and it survived in the dry climate until its rediscovery 1100 years later. The specific teaching about the Dream Gate appears in a dialogue between Mary and Jesus that takes place after the resurrection. The other disciples are confused and frightened. Jesus has appeared to them, taught them, and then departed again. They don't understand what they're supposed to do. Mary comforts them and then shares secret teaching Jesus gave her privately. Peter challenges her. He asks why Jesus would tell Mary things he didn't tell the male disciples. Andrew questions whether Jesus really taught these things at all. This conflict in the text itself shows us that even in the earliest Christian communities, there was tension about this knowledge. Some disciples accepted the operational teachings about consciousness. Others rejected them as incompatible with the simpler message they wanted to spread. The Gospel of Mary records Mary responding to Peter's challenge by describing what Jesus taught her about the ascent of the soul through the cosmic spheres and the powers that try to prevent that ascent. In that teaching, she describes how consciousness encounters hostile forces at different levels of reality, and how each level requires specific knowledge to pass through safely. The Dreamgate teaching is part of this larger framework. When the body sleeps and consciousness loosens from physical anchoring, it doesn't just drift randomly. It begins a preliminary version of the journey the soul will eventually take at death, rising through levels of reality, encountering the powers that govern those levels. For most people, this happens unconsciously. You sleep, you dream, you process the day's experiences, you wake up. But for individuals carrying what the Gnostic texts call monad consciousness, a spark of the original divine light that predates the creation of the material cosmos, the journey during sleep is different. The archons, which are the polar rulers of the material spheres, recognize this monad light. They recognize that you don't fully belong to their realm, that you're operating under a different authority, that you have the potential to escape their system entirely, and they can't allow that, so they attack during sleep when consciousness is most vulnerable. The word archon itself needs clarification because it's been mystified and sensationalized in a lot of modern spiritual content. Archon is simply Greek for ruler or authority. In Gnostic cosmology, the archons are the powers that govern the material realm, the cosmic bureaucracy, if you will. They're all not demons in the medieval Christian sense. They're not interested in your eternal damnation. They're interested in maintaining the system they control, and that system runs on the energy generated by embodied consciousness, experiencing limitation, fear, and suffering. Think of them as middle management in a vast corporate structure. They didn't create the system, but they benefit from it, and they enforce its rules. The material cosmos, in Gnostic understanding, is not the creation of the true God, the ineffable source beyond all naming. It's the creation of a lesser deity, the texts call the demiurge, often identified with the Old Testament God Yahweh. The demiurge created the material world as a prison for consciousness, and the archons serve as the guards. This is not metaphor. This is the literal cosmology presented in texts like the Apocryphon of John, the hypostasis of the archons, and the Gospel of Mary. Whether you accept this cosmology as objectively true or understand it as a psychological model for how consciousness experiences limitation, the practices that emerge from this framework work. The Dreamgate sealing works regardless of whether you believe archons are literal, non-physical entities or symbolic representations of unconscious trauma patterns. The practice functions on both levels simultaneously. Now let's talk about the throat as the dream gate, because this is where modern Western understanding of anatomy and energy completely diverges from the ancient systems. In yogic tradition, the throat chakra is called Vishuddha, and it governs communication, expression, and the bridge between the lower three chakras. Rooted in survival and physicality, and the upper three chakras focused on consciousness and spirit. But the dream gate is not exactly the same as Vishuddha, though it's located in the same general area. The dream gate is a specific energetic aperture at the front of the throat, approximately where you'd find the thyroid gland in physical anatomy. It's the point where the subtle body, what some traditions call the etheric body or energy body, interfaces with external energetic frequencies during sleep. When you're awake, your consciousness is anchored firmly in your physical body through multiple connection points. The primary anchor is what many traditions call the silver cord, which connects your physical body to your astral or energy body. This cord remains connected even during sleep, which is why your consciousness can travel in dreams, but you always return to your body. You can't get lost, but the connection loosens during sleep. It has to, or you'd never experience dreams at all. You'd just be unconscious for 8 hours. The dream state requires consciousness to partially separate from dense physical anchoring so it can process experiences in a more fluid, symbolic realm. The throat is where this loosening primarily occurs, and the dream gate is the specific point through which consciousness passes as it moves from waking state to dream state and back again. In most people, this process happens unconsciously and naturally. The dream gate opens when you fall asleep, consciousness moves into the dream realm, processes what it needs to process, and returns when you wake. The gate closes automatically. But in individuals carrying monad consciousness, and we'll get into what that actually means in practical terms, the dream gate functions differently. It opens wider, it remains open longer, and it emits a frequency signature that archonic entities can detect. Imagine you're in a dark city at night. Most houses are dark, lights off, inhabitants sleeping, but then you see one house where all the lights are blazing, music playing, windows wide open. That house attracts attention. That's what a dream gate looks like energetically in someone carrying monad consciousness. It's broadcasting a signal. The archons that patrol the lower astral realms, the frequency bands closest to physical reality where dreams occur, notice this signal and investigate. They recognize the quality of consciousness moving through that gate as incompatible with their system. It's like border patrol finding someone with the wrong passport. They can't simply destroy you, consciousness is indestructible, but they can harass you, drain you, and try to convince you to lower your frequency through trauma and fear. This is what the nightmare attacks are actually doing. When you experience a nightmare where you're being chased, attacked, humiliated or harmed, your emotional body generates fear frequency, shame frequency, despair frequency. These are lower vibration emotional states and they're dense, they're sticky. They weigh consciousness down. If you experience these states intensely and repeatedly, your overall frequency lowers. You become more compatible with the archonic system, less capable of the eventual ascent out of it. It's a containment strategy. The attacks aren't random harassment. They're targeted frequency modification. Here's where it gets even more specific, and this is information preserved in the Nag Hammadi Library, another cache of Gnostic texts discovered in Egypt in 1945. The text called The Hypostasis of the Archons describes how archonic entities operate in the dream realm. They cannot create anything original. They have no creative power themselves. What they do is scan your unconscious mind for fears, traumas, shames, and unresolved conflicts, and then they construct dream scenarios based on that material. They use your own psychological content against you. This is why nightmare content is always personalized. Someone with childhood abandonment trauma will experience abandonment scenarios in their attacks. Someone with sexual shame will experience sexually violating dreams. Someone with performance anxiety will dream of public failure and humiliation. The archons pull the template from your unconscious and animate it. They're not creating the content, you are unconsciously. They were just triggering it and amplifying it, then feeding on the emotional frequency you generate while experiencing it. This is also why traditional nightmare solutions don't work for these attacks. If you're told to confront your nightmare figures, establish dream awareness. Use lucid dreaming techniques to take control of the dream. These approaches might work for ordinary processing dreams, but they don't work for archonic attacks because the entity is adjusting the scenario based on your responses. If you become lucid and try to fight the threat in your dream, the threat escalates. If you try to run, the chase intensifies. If you try to wake yourself up, you often experience false awakenings where you think you've woken but you're still in the dream, and the attack continues. This is a design system. It's sophisticated, and it requires a solution that operates at a different level than dream content manipulation. That solution is the dream gate seal, and it works because it prevents the intrusion before the dream even starts. You're not fighting the archons in the dream realm, which is their territory. You're closing the gate before sleep so they never gain access in the first place. Now let's talk about what monad consciousness actually means, because this is where a lot of modern spiritual teaching becomes vague and self-congratulatory. People are told they're chosen, they're special, they carry divine light, they're starseeds or light workers or incarnated angels. This kind of language is spiritually bypassing at best and manipulative at worst. It creates spiritual ego and sets people up for disappointment when their specialness doesn't manifest in external validation or powers. The Gnostic text used the term monad differently. A monad is a spark of the original divine consciousness that existed before the demiurge created the material cosmos. According to Gnostic cosmology, the true God, sometimes called the pleroma or the fullness, is utterly transcendent, beyond all qualities, names, or descriptions. From this source emerged divine emanations called aeons. One of these aeons, Sophia, fell from the pleroma through an error or a desire to create independently, and her fall resulted in the creation of the demiurge, who then created the material universe. But some sparks of the original divine light, monads, became trapped in the material creation. They were clothed in material bodies and forgotten their origin. Most human beings, according to this system, are entirely creations of the demiurge. Body and soul both formed from material substance, but some human beings carry a monad, a spark that doesn't originate in this cosmos and doesn't ultimately belong here. These individuals are strangers in the world. They feel fundamentally alienated from material existence. They sense that something is deeply wrong with consensus reality. They're driven by a homesickness for a realm they can't consciously remember. This isn't about being better than other people. It's about having a different origin point and a different trajectory. In practical terms, how do you know if you carry a monad? There are specific markers. First, you've always felt like you don't belong here, like you're in the wrong place, playing the wrong game by rules that make no sense. Second, you have a persistent sense that you're supposed to remember something crucial, but you can't access the memory. Third, you experience the material world as fundamentally exhausting. Maintaining a physical body, participating in economic systems, following social conventions, it all feels like you're dragging enormous weight. Fourth, you have spontaneous experiences of gnosis, direct knowing that bypasses rational thought, where you suddenly understand profound truths about reality that you have no framework for explaining. Fifth, you're targeted. People with certain personality disorders seem to find you. Narcissists, energy vampires, manipulators gravitate toward you repeatedly. Institutions seem to work against you in ways that defy probability, and your dreams are chaotic, often terrifying, and leave you more tired than when you went to sleep. If you recognize these patterns, you're likely carrying monad consciousness, and that means your dream gate operates differently than the standard human dream gate. It's more open, more vulnerable, and more targeted by the forces that maintain this system. The Gospel of Mary describes Jesus explaining to Mary that those who carry the monad light will be opposed by the powers of the cosmos, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because their very existence is a threat to the system. If even one monad successfully navigates the ascent through the spheres and returns to the pleroma, it proves the system is escapable and that knowledge spreads. The Archons can't allow that, so they attack monad carriers persistently, trying to keep them disoriented, depleted, and convinced they're fundamentally broken. The nightmare attacks are part of this strategy. If you wake every morning exhausted and terrified, you have no energy for spiritual practice. You're too busy surviving to ask the deep questions. You're too depleted to access the gnosis that would reveal your true nature. This is intentional energetic warfare, and it's been going on for as long as monad consciousness has been incarnating in material bodies. Now we come to the actual practice, the 3 words Jesus taught for sealing the dream gate. Before I give you the words and the technique, you need to understand why the words are in Aramaic and why translation doesn't work. Language operates on multiple levels. There's the semantic level, the meaning of the words. There's the phonetic level, the actual sounds. And there's the vibrational level, the frequency the sounds create in the body and energy field when spoken. In Aramaic, which was Jesus' native language, words are built from triliteral roots. 3 consonants that carry core meaning, with different vowels and prefixes creating variations. The language has a rhythmic, chant-like quality when spoken, and it creates specific resonances in the throat and chest that Greek, Latin, and English don't replicate. When the early Christian texts were translated from Aramaic into Greek, the semantic meaning was preserved as much as possible, but the phonetic and vibrational qualities were completely lost. This didn't matter for theological concepts or moral teachings, but it mattered enormously for practices that depend on sound frequency to work. The Dreamgate seal is one of those practices. The 3 words create a specific vibration in the throat that restructures the energy field around the Dreamgate. Speaking the words in English or any other language simply doesn't produce the necessary frequency. It's like having the right key for a lock but made of the wrong material. The shape might be correct, but it won't turn the mechanism. The 3 Aramaic words are Eshmak, Nure, Shelama. These are phonetic approximations because the written Aramaic doesn't fully capture the throat sounds and emphasis patterns. Eshmak means your name or your designation, but it's actually a possessive form directed upward toward the divine source. You're not stating a name, you're asserting recognition of your true identity beyond material designation. Nura means fire or light, but not physical fire. It's the uncreated light, the fire that burns in the pleroma before material creation. Shalama means peace or wholeness, but it carries the sense of completeness, integration, being sealed into unity. Together, the 3 words create a statement that could be translated as, I am recognized by the uncreated light, sealed in wholeness, or named by the divine fire, I rest in peace. But again, translation loses the essential quality. What matters is the sound, the vibration, and the intention behind the speaking. Here's how the practice works, in precise detail. You perform this protocol immediately before sleep, after you're already in bed in your sleeping position. The timing is crucial. If you do it too early, the seal weakens before you actually fall asleep. First, you place your right hand on your throat, not gripping, not pressing hard, just resting your palm and fingers gently over the front of your throat where you can feel your voice box. If you're left-handed and this feels awkward, use your left hand, but the right hand is traditional because it's associated with active, projecting energy. Your hand creates a physical anchor for your attention and also provides a mild pressure that helps you focus on the exact location of the dream gate. Second, you close your eyes and take 3 slow breaths, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. This isn't complicated breathing technique, just slow natural breaths to settle your nervous system and bring your attention into your body. Third, with your hand still on your throat, you speak the 3 words aloud. Not shouted, not whispered, spoken in a normal conversational tone with clear pronunciation. Eshmak, Nure, Shalama. You speak the words as a single phrase with slight pauses between each word, allowing the sound to vibrate in your throat under your hand. You should feel the vibration of the words resonating in your throat, creating a buzz or hum sensation. If you don't feel any vibration, you're speaking too softly. The words need to be voiced, not whispered. Fourth, after speaking the words once, you keep your hand on your throat and sit with the sensation for about 30 seconds. Don't think about anything particular. Just feel the warmth of your hand, the slight vibration still echoing in your throat, the settling of your energy field. Fifth, you remove your hand, lie down in your sleeping position, and go to sleep normally. Don't try to stay awake and see what happens. Don't analyze whether it worked. Just go to sleep. The first night you do this, the effect is temporary. The seal lasts for that one sleep cycle and then it degrades. You'll likely notice a difference, fewer nightmares, less sleep disruption, waking more rested, but it's not yet permanent. The practice needs to be repeated for 7 consecutive nights to create a lasting change in how your dream gate operates. Here's what's happening over those 7 nights at an energetic level. Each time you speak the 3 words with your hand on your throat, you're creating a frequency pattern in your energy field. That pattern is like a recording, that gets stronger with repetition. The first night creates a faint impression. The second night reinforces it. By the 3rd or 4th night, your energy field starts to anticipate the pattern, and the seal begins to form more quickly when you speak the words. By the 7th night, the pattern is embedded deeply enough that your dream gate begins to close automatically when you enter sleep, even if you haven't performed the protocol. The seal becomes self-sustaining. Now here's something crucial that the Gospel of Mary emphasizes, but modern practitioners often miss. During the 7-night protocol, you may experience worse nightmares before they stop completely. This isn't a sign the practice isn't working, it's actually confirmation that it is. The Archons recognize what you're doing, they can sense the seal forming, and they escalate the attacks during the window when the seal isn't yet permanent, trying to frighten you into stopping the practice. This is the testing period. If you stop the protocol because the attack's intensified, the seal never completes and you remain vulnerable. But if you continue through the escalation, speaking the words every night regardless of how bad the previous night's dreams were, the seal completes on the 7th night and the attacks cease abruptly. Multiple practitioners who've used this technique report the same pattern. Nights 1 and 2 show improvement, nights 3 through 5 are actually worse than before starting the practice, and then night 6 shows sudden relief, with night 7 consolidating the change. This matches exactly what the Gospel of Mary describes when it records the disciples' experience. On the 3rd night, the powers of the air assailed us with visions more terrible than before, sensing that we were escaping their reach. On the 5th night, some of us wavered, but those who continued found that on the 7th night, the attack ceased, and peace came upon our sleep. This is a documented pattern across 15 centuries of practice, from the earliest Gnostic communities through medieval Christian mystics who preserved the technique in secret to modern practitioners rediscovering it. The 7-night threshold isn't arbitrary. It corresponds to how long it takes for an energetic pattern to stabilize in the human energy field, which is why so many spiritual practices across different traditions use 7-day or 7-week cycles for transformation work. Let's address the obvious question. Why hasn't everyone heard of this if it works so well? The answer has several layers. First, the source text was lost for 1500 years and even now exists only in fragmentary form. The Gospel of Mary that we have is missing pages, and some scholars believe the missing sections contained additional details about the dream gate practice that we simply don't have access to anymore. Second, when the Nag Hammadi library was discovered in 845 and scholars began translating and publishing the Gnostic texts, the material was treated as historical curiosity and theological heresy, not as practical manual. Academic scholarship focused on what these texts revealed about early Christian diversity and sectarian conflict, not on whether the practices they described actually worked. Third, the specific nature of Aramaic phonetics means that even when scholars correctly translated the 3 words semantically, they didn't preserve the pronunciation guide necessary for the practice to function. If you read Eshmak Nures Shelama in an academic translation, you have no idea how to pronounce the words, where to place emphasis, how long to hold the sounds. The vibrational quality is lost. Fourth, and most significantly, there's been deliberate suppression, not in the sense of conspiracy or shadowy organizations, but in the sense that religious institutions that built their authority on being necessary intermediaries between humans and the divine had no interest in promoting techniques that made individuals spiritually autonomous. If you conceal your own dream gate, protect your own consciousness, and access gnosis directly, without requiring sacraments or clerical intervention, the entire structure of institutional religious authority becomes obsolete. This pattern of suppression isn't unique to Christianity. Across religious traditions, there's tension between exoteric teachings, the public doctrine available to everyone, and esoteric teachings, the operational techniques reserved for initiates. The exoteric layer provides moral framework, community cohesion, and mythological meaning. The esoteric layer provides techniques that actually work to transform consciousness. In healthy spiritual systems, both layers are preserved and individuals progress from exoteric to esoteric as they're ready. But in corrupted systems, the esoteric layer gets suppressed, hidden, or lost, and only the exoteric shell remains. This is what happened to Christianity during the formation of institutional orthodoxy, the esoteric layer. The techniques Jesus actually taught for working with consciousness, energy, and the realities beyond the material was systematically excluded from the canon and preserved only in text labelled heretical. The Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Pistis Sophia, these texts contain operational knowledge, not just theology, and that knowledge was dangerous to institutional power, so it was buried. Now let's go deeper into the mechanics of what actually happens when you speak the three words. This is where ancient wisdom and modern understanding of bioacoustics, sematics, and neurolinguistics converge in fascinating ways. Sound is vibration. When you speak, your vocal cords vibrate, creating waves that travel through air as pressure changes. But those vibrations don't just travel outward, they also travel inward, through the bones and tissues of your skull, throat, and chest. This is called bone conduction, and it's why your voice sounds different to you when you hear a recording of yourself versus when you hear yourself speaking. When you place your hand on your throat and speak the three words, you're creating a specific pattern of internal vibration. The Aramaic phonemes, the particular consonants and vowels that make up Eshmak, Nure, Shalama, produce vibrations at frequencies that resonate with the thyroid gland, the vagus nerve, and the energetic structures that traditional systems call the throat chakra. Modern research into the vagus nerve, which runs from the brainstem down through the throat and chest, connecting to most major organs, shows that vocalization at certain frequencies stimulates this nerve and triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode that counteracts stress response. The three words spoken correctly create a vagal tone shift that signals safety to your entire nervous system. This is the physiological foundation. On top of that physiological effect, there's an energetic effect that modern science doesn't have instruments to measure yet, but that practitioners report consistently across centuries. When you speak the words with intention while focusing your awareness on your throat, you're directing consciousness to a specific point in your energy field. Where attention goes, energy flows. This is a foundational principle in every energetic healing system, from Qigong to Reiki to pranic healing. By placing your hand physically on your throat and speaking words that vibrate in that exact location, you're concentrating energy at the dream gate. The seal that forms isn't physical. You're not creating scar tissue or closing off your throat. You're creating an energetic boundary, a frequency fence that archonic entities can't cross. Think of it like a dog whistle that only certain beings can perceive. To your physical senses, nothing has changed. Your throat looks and feels the same, but to entities that perceive energy fields and frequency signatures, your dream gate now emits a closed signal. It's no longer an open invitation. It's a locked door. The reason the seal has to be reinforced for 7 nights is that you're essentially training your energy field to maintain this boundary automatically. The first night you create the boundary consciously with effort. By the 7th night, the boundary has become a default setting, maintained by the energy field itself without requiring conscious attention. There's a parallel here with modern neuroscience research on habit formation and neural plasticity. Studies show that it takes between 6 to 8 weeks for a new behaviour to become automatic, with the first week being the critical formation period. The 7-night protocol for the Dreamgate seal operates on the same principle but at the energetic level. You're creating a new default configuration in your energy field, and repetition is what makes it stick. After the initial 7 nights, most practitioners continue using the protocol periodically, perhaps once a week or once a month, as maintenance. This isn't strictly necessary, the seal remains functional without reinforcement, but regular practice keeps the seal strong and also serves as a reminder of your spiritual autonomy. It's a small ritual that reinforces your understanding that you're not helpless against archonic intrusion, that you have tools, that you can protect your own consciousness. That psychological shift, that movement from victim to agent, is as important as the energetic effect of the practice itself. Let's talk about variations and adaptations, because not everyone's situation is identical. Some people can't speak aloud without waking a partner or family members. Some people have vocal difficulties or disabilities that make speaking challenging. Some people are deaf or hard of hearing and relate to language differently. The core principle of the practice is that you're creating vibration at the dream gate while focusing intention. The traditional method uses vocalized Aramaic words because that's what Jesus taught and what 15 centuries of practitioners have used successfully. But the practice can be adapted. If you absolutely cannot speak aloud, you can subvocalize. Form the words with your mouth and throat without producing audible sound. This creates much weaker vibration, but it creates some vibration, and combined with strong intention, it can work. The seal won't be as robust, and you may need more than 7 nights for it to stabilize, but practitioners report success with this variation. Another adaptation is to use humming. Instead of speaking the 3 words, you place your hand on your throat and hum a single sustained tone for about 30 seconds, focusing on the vibration in your throat. The hum should be at a comfortable pitch in the middle of your range, not too high, not too low. While humming, you hold the intention of sealing the year, dream gate, of closing the energetic aperture to archonic intrusion. This method doesn't use the specific Aramaic frequencies, so it's less precise, but it works on the same principle of creating vibration at the gate while focusing consciousness there. For people who are deaf or hard of hearing and don't have access to the auditory experience of the words, a touch-based variation exists. You place both hands on your throat, fingers spread to cover the whole front of the throat area, and you apply very gentle pulsing pressure, a rhythm of light press and release, about 1 pulse per second for 30 pulses. While doing this, you visualize the dream gate as an open doorway and see it slowly closing like a vault door, sealing shut. The visualization combined with the rhythmic physical sensation creates the energetic effect. Again, this isn't as powerful as the vocalized Aramaic, but it follows the same logic of directing attention and energy to the specific location while holding the intention of sealing. These adaptations are not mentioned in the Gospel of Mary, which only records the spoken word version, but they've been developed by modern practitioners working with disabilities or constraints, and they report sufficient effectiveness to be worth trying if the traditional method isn't accessible to you. The key is consistency and intention. If you use one of these variations, stick with it for the full 7 nights, and approach it with genuine intention rather than just going through motions. Now let's address what happens during the practice period in terms of your actual dream content, because this is where most people need guidance to avoid misinterpreting their experience. On night 1 after performing the protocol, you'll likely sleep better than usual. Dreams may be more peaceful, or you may not remember dreams at all, which is fine. The absence of nightmare content is itself a sign the practice is working. On nights 2 and 3, you may still experience nightmares, but they'll feel different. Less visceral, less terrifying, almost like you're watching them from a slight distance rather than being fully immersed. This is your consciousness beginning to detach from the dream content, recognizing it as construct rather than reality. Then comes the challenge period, nights 4 and 5. This is when the Archons recognise they're losing access and escalate. The nightmares during these nights may be the worst you've ever experienced. You may wake in sleep paralysis, feeling a presence in the room, feeling pressure on your chest, hearing voices or seeing shadow figures. This is the archonic equivalent of a tantrum. They're throwing everything they have at you, trying to break your resolve, trying to convince you that the practice is making things worse, so you'll abandon it. This is the crucial moment. If you stop here, you confirm their strategy. Attacks work to control you, and they'll use escalation tactics against you forever. But if you continue the practice despite the attacks, if you speak the 3 words on night 5 even after a night of absolute terror on night 4, you break their power. The Gospel of Mary specifically addresses this testing period. Mary tells the other disciples that when they first used the protection Jesus taught, the Archons appeared in their dreams and mocked them, saying the words have no power, that they're still vulnerable, that they should give up this foolish practice. Some of the disciples believed these taunts and stopped. But those who continued discover that the taunts were lies, desperate attempts to prevent the seal from completing. By night 6, there's usually a sudden shift. The nightmares stop or become minimal. You wake feeling rested in a way you haven't felt in years. Your energy levels during the day are noticeably higher. By night 7, the seal completes, and from that point forward, your sleep becomes restorative rather than depleting. The nightmare attacks don't just decrease, they stop entirely. This isn't gradual improvement. It's a binary shift from attack to protected. Multiple practitioners describe waking on day 8 after the 7th night of practice and feeling like a weight they didn't know they were carrying has been lifted. Some describe crying not from sadness but from relief, finally experiencing what normal restful sleep feels like. Others describe a sense of anger, realizing how much energy has been stolen from them over years of these attacks and how unnecessary that suffering was. That anger is valid and important. Don't suppress it. The archonic system depends on humans not realizing they're being farmed. As long as you believe the nightmares are random, as long as you think sleep paralysis is just a neurological quirk, as long as you assume waking exhausted is normal, you remain compliant with the extraction. But once you realize it's a designed system and that you have tools to opt out of it, anger is the appropriate response. That anger can fuel your commitment to other protective practices, to learning more about how the archonic system operates, to eventually helping others who are still under attack. The Gospel of Mary describes this process of awakening as a movement from ignorance to knowledge, to wrath to freedom. Ignorance is thinking your suffering is random or deserved. Knowledge is understanding the actual mechanism of your suffering. Wrath is the emotional response to that understanding. And freedom is the state you enter when you take action based on knowledge, implementing practices that liberate you from the system. The Dreamgate sealing is often people's first experience of that freedom, and it's profound. Let's go deeper into the question of why this practice specifically uses the throat as the primary intervention point when other traditions might focus on the forehead for the third eye, or the crown for spiritual connection, or the heart for energetic centering. The answer is in the specific mechanics of how consciousness transitions between waking and sleeping states. During the waking state, consciousness is anchored throughout your entire body. Your awareness is distributed. You feel your feet, your hands, your torso, your head all simultaneously. There are multiple points of connection between consciousness and form, but as you fall asleep, this distributed awareness begins to collapse. It withdraws from the extremities first. Your feet and hands go numb, you stop feeling them. Then it withdraws from your limbs, your torso. The last points of withdrawal are the head and throat. Specifically, consciousness remains anchored at the crown and the throat longer than anywhere else. The crown is the traditional point of spiritual connection, associated with divine awareness and higher consciousness. The throat is the point associated with individual expression, voice, and personal will. As you move deeper into sleep, consciousness finally detaches from the throat, and at that moment the dream state begins. This is why the throat is called the dream gate. It's literally the last threshold consciousness crosses as it moves from waking to dreaming. Now here's the critical distinction. When consciousness detaches from the crown during sleep, you maintain connection to divine awareness. Your higher self, your monad, your connection to source, however you conceptualize it, remains accessible. But when consciousness detaches from the throat, you lose connection to personal will and discernment. You become passive in the dream state, accepting whatever scenarios unfold without questioning them. This is why you don't usually recognize you're dreaming while you're dreaming. The capacity for critical evaluation and willful choice has been suspended through the detachment at the throat. For most people, this is fine. Dreams process experience symbolically, and that processing doesn't require active will. But for people carrying monad consciousness, this suspension of will at the throat creates vulnerability. The archons gain access precisely at the moment when you can't resist, when you can't question the scenario being presented, when you're passive and receptive rather than active and discerning. By sealing the dream gate before sleep, you're essentially maintaining a thread of conscious awareness at the throat even as you enter sleep. You're not trying to stay fully awake, that would just be insomnia. You're creating a partial closure of the gate that allows normal dream processing but prevents archonic intrusion. Think of it like a screen door versus a solid door. A solid door completely closed would mean no airflow, no connection. That's not what you want. An open door means anything can walk in, that's the vulnerability. A screen door allows airflow while keeping insects out. That's what the seal creates. You still dream, you still process, but the hostile entities can't enter. This is mechanically different from lucid dreaming, and it's important to understand why. Lucid dreaming is when you gain awareness during a dream that you're dreaming, and then consciously interact with the dream content. It's a valuable skill for many purposes: exploring consciousness, working with symbolism, even creative problem solving. But lucid dreaming doesn't prevent archonic attacks, it only gives you tools to respond once an attack is already underway. The Dreamgate sealing is preventive, not responsive. It stops the attack from happening in the first place by making you undetectable or inaccessible to the entities. This is a crucial distinction because many people who experience nightmare attacks try to solve them through lucid dreaming. They learn to recognize their dreaming. They try to take control of the scenario. They attempt to confront or defeat the nightmare figures. Sometimes this seems to work temporarily, but then the attacks resume in new forms because the underlying vulnerability, the open dream gate, hasn't been addressed. The Archons adjust their strategy. If you fight them in one form, they appear in another. If you banish one scenario, they create a different one. Lucid dreaming becomes an exhausting battle within the dream realm rather than a resolution of the problem. The Dreamgate sealing resolves it at the source. There's also a question of energetic cost. Lucid dreaming requires active consciousness during sleep. You're maintaining awareness, making decisions, engaging will. This expends energy. Some people can do this occasionally without issue, but if you're lucid dreaming every night as a defense against attacks, you're not getting restorative sleep, you're working all night. The Dreamgate sealing allows you to sleep normally, unconsciously, restoratively, because you're protected before you enter sleep, rather than having to protect yourself during sleep. The seal does the work so your consciousness doesn't have to. After the 7-night protocol completes, practitioners consistently report dreaming less frequently or less vividly, which might sound like a loss, but is actually a return to normal function. When you're under constant archonic attack, your dream space is hyperactive. Constant scenarios, constant narrative, constant emotional intensity. That's not normal healthy dreaming, that's your consciousness being manipulated. Normal healthy dreaming for most people involves some dreams you remember, some you don't. Periods of deep sleep without dream recall at all, and waking feeling restored rather than depleted. The Dreamgate ceiling allows your sleep architecture to return to this natural pattern. Now let's address the deeper cosmological question that inevitably arises. If the Archons are real, and they're farming human consciousness through mechanisms like dream attacks, why don't more people know about this? Why isn't this common knowledge? The answer requires understanding how the Archonic system maintains itself through information control and attention management. The system doesn't primarily operate through direct censorship, though that happens too, but through distraction and misdirection. Most people's attention is consumed by survival concerns, making money, maintaining relationships, managing health, pursuing entertainment. These aren't inherently bad things, but when your attention is completely absorbed by immediate physical and emotional concerns, you have no bandwidth for asking deeper questions about the nature of reality or noticing the patterns of energetic extraction happening to you. You just assume tiredness is normal, nightmares are random, and life is hard. The system also controls information by mixing truth with lies in confusing ways. There's accurate information about Archons available, but it's surrounded by sensationalized conspiracy theories, New Age fantasy, and deliberate disinformation. Someone genuinely seeking knowledge has to sift through enormous amounts of nonsense to find the functional truth, and most people give up in frustration. This is by design. If you make truth-seeking exhausting and socially stigmatized, if seeking knowledge about Archons or Gnostic cosmology gets you labeled as a conspiracy theorist or a religious heretic, most people will self-censor rather than risk social rejection. The system also maintains itself through spiritual materialism and false awakening. Someone has a genuine gnosis experience, a moment of seeing through the illusion, and instead of pursuing that thread deeper, they get distracted into the spiritual marketplace, buying crystals, attending workshops, collecting certifications, building an identity as a spiritual person. The genuine impulse toward liberation gets channeled into consumerism and ego building. This is an incredibly effective containment strategy because the person feels like they're doing spiritual work. They're a part of the awakened community, but they're not actually threatening the system. They're participating in a controlled opposition version of spirituality that poses no real challenge to Archonic control. The Dreamgate teaching, by contrast, is genuinely threatening because it's simple, free, and it works. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need a teacher or a guru to initiate you. You don't need to join a community or attend a retreat. You just need the words and the technique, and you can liberate yourself from at least one major vector of Archonic intrusion. This kind of information spreads person to person, outside of commercial spiritual systems, and that's exactly why it was suppressed historically and why it remains obscure today. Let's talk about what happens after the 7-night protocol completes and you've successfully sealed your Dreamgate. This isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning. When you're no longer being drained energetically through nightmare attacks when you're waking rested and maintaining your energy throughout the day, you have capacity for deeper practice that wasn't possible before. Many practitioners report that after sealing the Dreamgate, they spontaneously begin having different kinds of dreams, teaching dreams, visionary dreams, dreams where they receive guidance or information. This makes sense because you've reclaimed your dream space from hostile occupation. Now that space can be used for its intended purpose. Communication between your conscious mind and your deeper consciousness, between your personal awareness and the divine awareness that guides you. Some people begin experiencing what the tradition calls true dreams, dreams that aren't symbolic processing of daily experience but actual perception of other realities or future events. This isn't fantasy. It's documented across cultures and traditions that once the dream space is purified, it can become a vehicle for genuine gnosis. You may also notice changes in waking consciousness, with your energy no longer being siphoned at night. You have more presence during the day. Your meditation practice, if you have one, deepens. Your ability to focus improves. Your emotional resilience increases because you're not operating from a chronically depleted state. Some practitioners report that synchronicities increase, meaningful coincidences, finding the right book at the right time, meeting people who have exactly the knowledge you need. This is because you're now broadcasting a different frequency. You're not sending out the distress signal of an attacked and depleted person. You're emanating the signature of someone who's taken sovereign control of their consciousness, and that attracts different responses from the field of reality. Other people carrying monad consciousness recognize you as an ally. Teachers appear, opportunities open. This isn't magic or manifestation in the New Age sense. It's the natural result of shifting your energetic state from victim to agent. The Gospel of Mary describes a tow phenomenon. When we sealed ourselves against the powers of the air, when we took authority over our own consciousness and sleep, the veil began to thin. We saw more clearly, we understood more deeply, and those who had walked this path before us recognized us and came to guide us further. This is where the practice connects to the larger Gnostic project of awakening and ascent. The Dream Gate sealing is one technique among many. It addresses one specific vulnerability, but the ultimate goal in Gnostic spirituality isn't just to sleep better. It's to fully awaken to your true nature as a monad, to remember your origin beyond this cosmos, and eventually to make the ascent back to the pleroma, escaping the archonic system entirely. The Dream Gate practice is preparation for that larger work. It proves to you that the archons are real, that they can be resisted, and that you have power. It breaks the spell of helplessness. Once you've successfully protected yourself in one domain, you begin to wonder what other domains might also be under archonic influence and what other protections might be available. You start asking bigger questions. Why do I have to work a job I hate to earn money to buy food to maintain a body that will die? Why does the economic system extract my life force in exchange for survival? Why do relationships so often become energy exchanges rather than genuine connection? Why does the political system offer only false choices? These aren't just social or philosophical questions, they're Gnostic questions, questions that point toward the artificial nature of the entire system. The Gnostic texts describe the material cosmos as a prison, but not a prison of stone and bars. It's a prison of ignorance and energetic extraction. The bars are beliefs, belief that you're just a body, belief that death is the end, belief that you're powerless, belief that this is all there is, and the guards are the archons, enforcing those beliefs through trauma, fear, and exhaustion. Every time you successfully resist one of their tactics, one of those bars weakens. The Dream Gate sealing weakens a major bar, the belief that your consciousness is vulnerable and helpless during sleep. Once that bar is gone, you start testing other bars. Can I protect my energy during waking hours? Can I resist manipulation in relationships? Can I maintain my frequency even in hostile environments? Can I access gnosis directly without intermediaries? Each question you ask and each practice you implement weakens the prison further until eventually the entire structure becomes transparent and you see that you were never actually locked in. You were locked in by your own ignorance, and knowledge is the key. Let's return to practical specifics because theory without practice is useless. After you complete the initial 7-night protocol, here's what your ongoing practice might look like. Some practitioners continue the full protocol every night indefinitely. This is certainly effective and there's no harm in it, but it's not necessary. Most people find that performing the protocol once a week is sufficient to maintain the seal. Sunday night is traditional because it aligns with the solar day of renewal, but any consistent schedule works. The weekly reinforcement takes about 1 minute. You're not building the seal from scratch each time, just refreshing it. Other practitioners only use the protocol when they notice attacks beginning to return. If you go weeks or months with peaceful sleep and then suddenly start having nightmares again, that's a sign the seal has weakened and needs reinforcement. You would then do the 3 words protocol for 3 nights in a row, not the full 7 since you're not building from zero, just restoring what was there. What you don't want to do is use the protocol only once and then never again. Even though the 7-night sequence creates lasting change, energetic structures require some maintenance. Think of it like physical exercise. If you train for 7 days and build muscle, that muscle doesn't disappear immediately when you stop, but it will eventually atrophy without any maintenance. There's also the question of what to do if you miss a night during the initial 7-night sequence. Life happens. You forget. You fall asleep before performing the protocol. You're travelling and sleeping in a strange place where you don't feel comfortable speaking aloud. If you miss one night during the 7, you don't have to start completely over, but you do need to add that night to the end. So if you complete nights 1 through 4 successfully, miss night 5, and then do night 6, you're not on night 6, you're on night 5. You need to continue for 3 more consecutive nights to complete the sequence. If you miss 2 nights, especially in a row, it's generally better to start the 7-night counter over from the beginning because the energetic momentum has been broken. The seal is being built through consistent repetition, and too much interruption means the pattern doesn't stabilize. This is one reason why choosing to begin the protocol at a time when you can realistically commit to 7 consecutive nights is important. Don't start it the day before you leave for a trip or during a period of major life upheaval. Wait until you have relative stability and can make the practice a priority for 1 week. Now let's address some of the unusual experiences practitioners report during and after the Dreamgate sealing protocol, because some of these can be alarming if you're not prepared for them. First, during the escalation period on nights 3 through 5, some people experience what feels like external pressure on their throat during the day. It's not painful, just a sense of heaviness or constriction, like wearing a tight collar. This is the archonic entities attempting to discourage you from continuing the practice by creating physical discomfort in the area you're working with. If you experience this, do not interpret it as a sign you're harming yourself or that the practice is dangerous. It's actually confirmation that the practice is working and that the entities are threatened by it. The pressure typically disappears on its own by day 6. If you want to address it actively, you can repeat the 3 words during the day whenever you notice the pressure, and this usually provides immediate relief. Second, some people experience temporary changes in their voice during the 7-night protocol. Your voice might sound different to you, deeper, more resonant, or occasionally strained. This is because you're working directly with the throat chakra, and energetic changes in that area can temporarily affect physical voice production. Again, this normalizes on its own and isn't a cause for concern. Third, and this is the one that can be genuinely frightening, some people experience intense sleep paralysis on night 4 or 5, accompanied by vivid perception of archonic entities in the room. Sleep paralysis is a documented neurological phenomenon where consciousness awakens but the body remains in the paralyzed state that prevents you from physically acting out dreams. During normal sleep paralysis, people often sense a presence in the room or feel pressure on their chest because the brain is trying to explain why the body won't respond to movement commands. But during archonically induced sleep paralysis within the Dreamgate sealing protocol, what you're experiencing isn't just neurological misfiring. You're actually perceiving the entities attempting to access your Dreamgate and encountering the partial seal that's already been established. They can't fully access you anymore, but they can still make themselves perceptible at the boundary. Practitioners describe seeing shadow figures, feeling hands touching them, hearing voices threatening them or trying to convince them to stop this practice. This experience is terrifying, but you need to understand what's actually happening. You're winning. If they could still access you fully, they wouldn't need to manifest in the Thiminnal way. They wouldn't need to threaten or intimidate. They'd just attack in dreams as they've always done. The fact that they're appearing at the boundary and using intimidation tactics rather than direct assault means the seal is working and they're desperate. If you experience this, the correct response is to speak the 3 words again, even though you're paralyzed and it will come out as a whisper or might only happen mentally. Even sub-vocalized or mentally voiced, the words will complete the seal for that night and the entities will withdraw. You'll either fall back into normal sleep or wake fully, and either way the paralysis will end within seconds. Fourth, some practitioners report what they describe as the archons showing me what they really are during dreams in the escalation period. These are dreams where the nightmare scenario drops away and you see the entities operating it, often described as geometric forms, insectoid shapes, or fractal patterns, rather than the demons or monsters of cultural imagination. These aren't symbolic dreams. This is your consciousness briefly perceiving the actual nature of archonic entities without the costume of nightmare imagery they usually wear. Different practitioners describe them differently because perception is filtered through individual consciousness. But common features include lack of conventional form, coldness or absence of life energy, mechanical or artificial quality, and the sense that they're following programming rather than acting with independent will. If you have this kind of dream, it can be disturbing because it shatters any remaining doubt that you're just dealing with random brain activity. You're confronting the reality of non-physical entities with agency and intention toward you, but again, this isn't a sign the practice is failing. It's a sign you're seeing more clearly. The entities haven't changed. You have. Your perception has sharpened enough to see what's actually there, rather than the illusion they prefer to project. Let's talk about the long-term trajectory of practitioners who've sealed their dream gates and continued with Gnostic practice. The pattern that emerges across testimonies is consistent enough to be predictable. In the first month after completing the 7-night protocol, people report dramatic improvements in physical energy, mental clarity, and emotional stability. They attribute this directly to finally getting restorative sleep without nightly attacks. In months 2 and 3, people typically report spiritual experiences that were previously inaccessible to them. Spontaneous gnosis, mystical visions, clear intuitive guidance. It's as if consciousness that was previously dedicated to survival and defense is now available for higher function. Between months 3 and 6, people who often report life changes that seem to happen on their own. Toxic relationships end, new opportunities appear, living situations improve. This is the natural result of operating from a restored energetic state rather than a depleted one. You make different choices, you attract different circumstances. Between 6 months and a year, many practitioners report beginning even to teach others about the dream gate sealing or other Gnostic practices. They feel compelled to share what they've learned because they remember how desperate they were before finding this knowledge. This is how the teaching propagates, person to person, outside of institutional structures, driven by gratitude rather than commerce. After a year or more, practitioners typically describe their relationship to the material world as fundamentally changed. They still participate, they still work, maintain relationships, live in bodies, but they no longer identify with the material realm as ultimate reality. They understand it as a temporary experience, a school or a prison, depending on how you work with it, but not home. This is the Gnostic awakening the texts describe, recognizing that you're a stranger in this world, that your true origin and destiny lie beyond the material, and living accordingly. This doesn't mean becoming passive or withdrawn. Many Gnostic practitioners are highly engaged with the world, working to reduce suffering and increase knowledge, but they engage from a different foundation, not from believing this is all there is and desperately trying to make it perfect, but from understanding this is a temporary assignment and doing what they can while they're here. The dream gate sealing is often the practice that makes this shift possible because it's your first direct proof that there are realities beyond the physical, that you have power in those realities, and that liberation from archonic control is achievable rather than theoretical. Now we need to address a question that comes up frequently. Is this practice compatible with other spiritual traditions and religions, or is it exclusively Gnostic? The answer is nuanced. The practice comes from a Gnostic Christian context, specifically from the teachings of Jesus as recorded by Mary Magdalene. But the underlying principles aren't exclusive to Gnosticism. The concept of hostile non-physical entities that attack during sleep appears in Jewish mysticism, where they're called Chedim, or Mazakim. It appears in Islamic tradition, where jinn are understood to have access to humans during sleep and dream states. It appears in Hindu and Buddhist traditions, where various classes of pretas, asuras and other entities are described as interfering with spiritual practitioners. It appears in indigenous shamanic traditions worldwide, where sorcerers and malevolent spirits are understood to attack through dreams. The terminology changes, but the phenomenon is consistent, so practitioners from various traditions have adapted the Dreamgate sealing to their own frameworks. A Jewish practitioner might speak the words in Hebrew rather than Aramaic, or might add a protective psalm. A Muslim practitioner might combine the technique with Quranic verses for protection. A Buddhist might integrate it with refuge vows and visualization of protective deities. An indigenous practitioner might call on ancestral spirits while performing the protocol. These adaptations can work because the core mechanism isn't dependent on Gnostic theology. The mechanism is create vibration at the throat while focusing intention on sealing the energetic aperture through which consciousness passes during sleep. The Aramaic words Jesus taught are the most powerful method because they were specifically designed for this purpose and have been tested successfully for 15 centuries. But the principle can be applied through other linguistic and cultural frameworks if those frameworks are what give you genuine faith and intention. What doesn't work is approaching the practice with skepticism or performing it mechanically without genuine intention. The seal requires consciousness to direct energy, and consciousness directs energy through attention and intention. If you speak the words while thinking, "This probably won't work," or "I'm just trying this to see if it's real," you're not actually creating the seal, you're making sounds. For the practice to function, you need at least provisional faith, the willingness to act as if it will work and give it genuine effort, even if you have doubts. The results of the practice then either confirm or deny its validity, and you can adjust your belief based on results rather than starting from certainty. There's also the question of whether the practice is safe. Could sealing your dream gate prevent legitimate spiritual experiences or guidance that might come through dreams? Could it block helpful entities or guides? The answer is that the seal is selective. It prevents archonic intrusion specifically. Entities that feed on fear, generate trauma, and operate through manipulation. But the seal doesn't block communication from your higher self, from divine sources, from guides or teachers operating from genuine service. The difference is frequency. Archonic entities operate at lower frequencies. Fear, shame, despair, anger, lust, greed. Beneficial entities operate at higher frequencies. Love, joy, peace, wisdom, compassion. The seal blocks low-frequency intrusion but remains permeable to high-frequency communication. In practice, this means that after sealing your dream gate, you may actually receive clearer spiritual guidance through dreams because the signal-to-noise ratio has improved. Previously, any genuine guidance was drowned out by archonic interference. Now the interference is blocked, and the genuine signal can come through clearly. Some practitioners worry that sealing the dream gate might prevent them from lucid dreaming or from doing deliberate dream work. This is a legitimate concern, but in practice it doesn't seem to be an issue. The seal prevents unwanted intrusion. It doesn't prevent deliberate travel. If you practice lucid dreaming or astral projection, you can still initiate those states intentionally. You're consciously choosing to open the gate and travel, and the seal doesn't interfere with conscious choice. What it prevents is the passive vulnerability that archonic entities exploit, the automatic opening of the gate when you sleep without awareness. Think of it as the difference between leaving your front door wide open versus opening it when you consciously choose to go out or invite someone in. The seal is the locked door when you're not actively using it, but you still have the key, and you can unlock it from the inside whenever you want. Let's address the inevitable question about evidence and verification. How do you know this works? How do you know archons are real versus the dream gate sealing being a placebo that makes you feel better psychologically? First, understand that from a Gnostic epistemological framework, Gnosis is direct knowledge that doesn't require external validation. If you seal your dream gate, your nightmares stop, you sleep restfully, you wake with energy, and you feel a tangible shift in your energetic state. That's knowledge. You don't need a double-blind, controlled study to tell you whether your sleep improved. You experience it directly. That said, there are ways to verify the practice beyond subjective experience. Multiple practitioners performing the practice independently and reporting the same patterns: initial improvement, escalation on nights 3 through 5, resolution on night 7, long-term cessation of nightmare attacks, constitutes replicable results. The pattern is too consistent across too many people in too many contexts to be random. If this were placebo, you'd expect much more variation in when and how people experience results. You'd expect some people to improve immediately, some gradually, some not at all, but instead you see the same 7-night progression happening repeatedly. Second, the specificity of the practice suggests real mechanism rather than placebo. If belief alone was sufficient to stop nightmares, then any protective ritual done with conviction should work equally well. But practitioners report that generic protective practices, visualizing white light, calling on angels, setting intentions for peaceful sleep, provide temporary or partial relief at best, while the dream gate sealing provides complete and lasting relief. The difference suggests the Aramaic words and throat placement are actually doing something specific beyond generic positive thinking. Third, the phenomenon of escalation during nights 3 through 5 is strong evidence against placebo. Placebo effects typically show smooth improvement over time. If you believe something will help you, you feel better. You don't feel worse midway through and then better at the end unless there's an actual mechanism at work. The escalation pattern makes sense if archonic entities are real and responding to the seal being built, but it makes no sense if the entire phenomenon is psychological. Fourth, practitioners report experiences during the protocol that they had no framework for expecting. Seeing archonic entities without costume, experiencing sleep paralysis with entity presence, feeling throat pressure during the day. These aren't experiences that people read about in advance and then imagine happening. They're genuinely surprising when they occur, which suggests they're not being generated by expectation. Fifth, the long-term effects extend beyond nightmare cessation to broader life changes. Relationship shifts, opportunity synchronicities, spiritual experiences that practitioners don't necessarily expect based on a practice focused on sleep. If this were placebo effects, placebo should be limited to the domain where placebo is expected. Instead, the effects cascade across multiple life domains in ways that suggest genuine energetic rather than belief-based improvement. None of this constitutes scientific proof in the conventional sense, but it constitutes adequate evidence for individuals seeking practices that work. If you're being attacked in dreams, you don't need peer-reviewed research papers, you need a solution. The Dreamgate sealing is a solution that works, verifiable through your own experience, and that's sufficient. Now let's go deeper into the cosmological framework, because understanding why archons attack helps you maintain motivation during the challenging parts of the practice. According to the Gnostic texts, particularly the Apocryphon of John and the hypostasis of the archons, the material cosmos exists as a result of error and ignorance, not divine intention. The true God, the ineffable source, didn't create matter. Matter is solidification of separation from divine unity. When the Aeon Sophia attempted to create without her divine consort, her creation was flawed. It was the demiurge, a being of ignorance who believed himself to be the only god. The demiurge then created the material cosmos and the archons to rule it, modelling the structure on the divine pleroma, but unable to create anything genuinely good or true, because he himself is ignorant of the true God. The archons are essentially bureaucrats managing a system they didn't design and don't fully understand. They enforce the rules of materiality, separation, limitation, death, suffering, not because they're evil in some cosmic sense, but because that's the system they were created to maintain. Human beings in this cosmology exist in two categories. Most humans are entirely creations of the demiurge, body fashioned from matter, soul from psychic substance, both belonging to this cosmos. These humans return to the archonic realms after death, reincarnate within the system, and eventually dissolve back into the cosmic substance from which they were made. They're native to this reality. But some humans carry a monad, a spark of divine light from the pleroma that fell into matter when Sophia fell. These humans are foreigners. Their bodies and souls were created by the demiurge, but the spirit, the monad, comes from beyond this cosmos and ultimately doesn't belong here. The monad carriers are asleep, amnesiacs who've forgotten their origin, trapped in matter and being farmed by archons who recognize the monad light, but seek to prevent these individuals from waking up and escaping. This is the war the Gnostic texts describe, not a war between good and evil in conventional terms, but a war between ignorance and knowledge, between the archonic system trying to maintain itself and the monad carriers trying to wake up and go home. The archons attack monad carriers through multiple vectors. Dream attacks are one vector, keeping you depleted and terrified so you can't access gnosis. But there are others. Trauma that fragments consciousness, addiction that enslaves consciousness, false spiritual teachings that redirect awakening energy into dead ends, toxic relationships that drain energy, economic systems that consume your life force, entertainment that keeps you distracted, belief system that limit your perception. Each vector is designed to keep you asleep, to keep you feeding the system with your energy and attention, to prevent you from remembering what you are and where you came from. The Dreamgate sealing addresses one vector. It doesn't solve the entire problem, but it removes one major obstacle to awakening. Once you're not being attacked at night, you have energy and clarity to address the other vectors. You can begin to recognize trauma patterns and heal them. You can identify energy vampires in your life and establish boundaries. You can question the belief systems you've been programmed with. You can reduce consumption and participation in extractive economic structures. Each vector you address weakens the system's hold on you. Jesus, in the Gnostic understanding, was a monad carrier who fully awakened while in a physical body, and then taught others how to do the same. He wasn't advocating for belief in him as saviour. He was teaching operational techniques for liberation from archonic control. The Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip. These texts record those techniques. Seal your dream gate. Become like a child. Return to the state before social conditioning. Fast to loosen attachment to material consumption. Pray in secret. Develop direct connection to the divine without religious intermediaries. Take up your cross. Accept the difficulty of walking the path of awakening in a world designed to keep you asleep. These aren't moral teachings. There were survival instructions for prisoners attempting escape. The institutional church that emerged after Jesus' death took his liberation teachings, stripped them of operational content, and converted them into a control system. Instead of teaching people how to seal their dream gates, the church taught people to fear demons and rely on priests for protection. Instead of teaching people how to access gnosis directly, the the Church established itself as the only valid intermediary between humans and God. Instead of teaching people they carry divine light and can escape this cosmos entirely, the Church taught people they're sinful and need institutional salvation. This inversion is what the Gnostics recognized as the ultimate archonic trick, taking the teaching of liberation and converting it into a new prison. This is why the Gospel of Mary and the other Gnostic texts were suppressed, not because they were heretical in some abstract theological sense, but because they contained knowledge that made institutional control impossible. If people knew they could protect themselves from archonic attack through a simple 3-word practice, priest-mediated protection rituals would become obsolete. If people knew they carried divine light and could access gnosis directly, the entire structure of religious authority would collapse. The Church that declared these texts heretical and ordered them destroyed wasn't fighting theological error. It was defending its power base against operational knowledge that threatened its existence. The Dream Gate sealing survived despite suppression because individual practitioners preserved it secretly and transmitted it through non-institutional channels. Medieval Christian mystics used it. Renaissance Hermeticists used it. Modern Gnostic communities rediscovering the ancient texts tested it and confirmed it still works. You're receiving this teaching through the same non-institutional channel that has preserved it for centuries. Direct transmission from practitioner to seeker, outside of religious authority and commercial spirituality. Let me give you the 7-night protocol again in complete detail, incorporating everything we've covered so you have a single comprehensive instruction set. Day 1. Before bed, after you're already lying in your sleeping position, place your right hand on your throat. Close your eyes, take 3 slow breaths, in through nose, out through mouth. Speak the 3 words aloud in normal conversational volume. Eshmak, Nure, Shalama. Feel the vibration in your throat under your hand. After speaking the words, keep your hand in place for 30 seconds, just feeling the sensation. Remove your hand, settle into sleep position, and go to sleep normally. Don't try to analyze whether it worked, just sleep. If you wake during the night, don't repeat the words. The seal lasts the full night once created. Night 2, repeat the exact same process. Night 3, same process, but be aware that this is often when escalation begins. If nightmares increase, understand this is the entities responding to the seal being built, not a sign the practice isn't working. Night 4, same process. This is typically the peak of escalation. If you experience intense nightmares or sleep paralysis, remember this is the testing period. Continue the practice regardless of how bad the previous night was. Night 5, same process. By tonight or tomorrow morning, the escalation should begin to ease. Night 6, same process. Most people notice significant improvement by this night. Sleep is deeper, nightmares are minimal or absent. Night 7, final night of the protocol, same process. The seal completes tonight. After you wake on day 8, your dream gate is sealed and will remain so with minimal maintenance. Ongoing maintenance. Choose 1 night per week, same night each week if possible to repeat the protocol. This takes 60 seconds and keeps the seal strong. If you go weeks without maintenance and notice nightmares returning, do a 3-night refresher, 3 consecutive nights of the protocol to restore the seal fully. Troubleshooting. If you miss 1 night during the initial 7, add 1 night to the end. If you miss 2 nights, especially consecutive, restart the 7-night count. If you absolutely cannot speak aloud, use subvocalization or humming as described earlier, but be aware the seal will be weaker and may require more than 7 nights to stabilize. If you experience intense throat pressure during the day during nights 3 through 5, repeat the 3 words whenever you notice the pressure. This is archonic attempt to discourage you, not harm from the practice. If you experience sleep paralysis with entity presence, Speak the 3 words even if you're paralyzed and they come out as whisper or mental voice only. This completes the seal and the entities withdraw immediately. Advanced variations. After successfully completing the initial 7-night protocol and maintaining the seal for at least 1 month, you can experiment with advanced applications. One advanced technique is to seal other people's dream gates if they're unable to do it themselves: children, elderly parents, disabled family members. You perform the protocol for them by placing your hand on their throat while they're falling asleep and speaking the words on their behalf. This only works if they're aware you're doing it and consenting, even if non-verbally. You cannot seal someone's dream gate without their knowledge or against their will. The seal is protective, not controlling, and it requires the person's consciousness to participate in receiving it. Children are a special case. If your child is experiencing nightmare attacks and is too young to perform the protocol themselves, you can teach them a simplified version. You place your hand on their throat, speak the words for them, and have them repeat the words after you even if their pronunciation is imperfect. A child as young as 4 or 5 can learn this practice with parental guidance. The key is that the child understands they're protecting themselves from bad dreams and actively participates rather than just passively receiving. This builds their sense of spiritual agency while providing the protection they need. Another advanced application is using the 3 words during waking hours for energetic protection in hostile environments. If you're entering a situation where you know you'll encounter energy vampires, narcissists, or just generically negative energy, you can sub-vocalize the 3 words while touching your throat before entering the situation. This creates a temporary shield that lasts several hours and makes you less permeable to energetic attack. The protection isn't absolute. You'll still perceive the hostile energy, but it won't penetrate your field and drain you the way it would otherwise. Practitioners use this technique before difficult work meetings, family gatherings with toxic relatives, or any situation where they need to maintain their energy despite external negativity. This waking application doesn't replace the nighttime dreamgate sealing. There are separate uses of the same core technique. Yet another advanced application is using the words during meditation or spiritual practice to deepen your state of consciousness. When you speak the 3 words during meditation, the vibration in your throat creates a resonance that can open higher perception. Some practitioners report that speaking the words during meditation leads to visions, mystical experiences, or clarity on problems they have been struggling with. This isn't guaranteed. You can't use the words to force spiritual experiences, but the words create conditions favorable to gnosis. They quiet the monkey mind, settle the energy field, and open the channel between personal consciousness and divine consciousness. Let's address the question of what happens to the archonic entities after you seal your dream gate and they can no longer access you. Do they give up and leave you alone permanently? Do they try different attack vectors? The pattern practitioners report is that after the dream gate seal completes, dream attacks stop completely and permanently for that vector. The archons don't keep testing the seal. They recognize it's closed and move on to targets they can still access. However, they may increase efforts in other areas of your life. You might notice increased workplace conflicts, relationship tensions, financial pressures, or health issues in the weeks and months after sealing your dream gate. This isn't paranoia or coincidence. The archons operate through multiple systems simultaneously: personal relationships, economic structures, health challenges, social conflicts. When you close one access point, they emphasize the others. This is why the dream gate sealing, powerful as it is, isn't a complete solution. It's one practice among many that you'll need to develop a full protection protocol. Other practices to integrate include daily grounding and centering meditation to maintain your energetic coherence, regular energetic cleansing of your living space, discernment practices to recognize energy vampires and narcissists before they establish hooks in you, economic minimalism to reduce your dependence on extractive systems, cultivation of genuine relationships with other awakening individuals for mutual support, and consistent study of Gnostic and other liberating spiritual texts to deepen your understanding. The long-term goal isn't just to defend yourself from archonic attack, but to become uninteresting to the archons entirely by lowering your frequency signature in their perceptual range. This might sound contradictory. Don't you want to raise your frequency? The answer is nuanced. You want to raise your actual consciousness and connection to divine source, but you also want to become invisible to archonic perception, and they track you by certain signatures. Monad carriers naturally emit high-frequency light that archons notice and target. But as you develop spiritual maturity, you learn to veil that light when necessary, not diminishing it, but simply not broadcasting it into realms where it attracts hostility. This is what esoteric traditions call occultation, hiding in plain sight. You maintain your inner light and connection, but don't announce it energetically to entities that would attack you for it. This is why advanced spiritual practitioners often appear completely ordinary in external life, while maintaining profound inner development. They've learned to be invisible to the archonic surveillance system. The Dreamgate sealing is your first lesson in this skill, because it teaches you to close an energetic aperture that was broadcasting your presence. As you develop, you learn to close or veil other apertures until you're essentially operating beneath archonic detection entirely. At that point, attacks stop, not because you're defended, but because you're undetectable. This brings us to the ultimate trajectory of Gnostic practice, which the texts describe as the ascent. The ascent is the journey consciousness makes after death through the spheres controlled by the archons, returning to the pleroma. For most humans, death means dissolution back into the cosmic substance or reincarnation within the archonic system. But for monad carriers who've achieved gnosis, death is the moment of escape. Consciousness separates from the body and begins rising through the levels of reality. At each level, archonic powers challenge you, demanding to know by what authority you're ascending through their domain. If you don't have the knowledge, the passwords, the seals, they turn you back and you reincarnate. But if you have the knowledge, if you know the names of the powers, if you can speak the words of authority, if you carry the seals, they must let you pass. Eventually you rise through all the archonic spheres and return to the pleroma, the realm of divine light from which your monad originally fell. This is liberation. This is escape. This is the completion of the Gnostic path. The practices you learn during physical life are preparation for this journey. The Dreamgate sealing teaches you to recognize archonic entities and protect yourself from them. Other Gnostic practices teach you the names of the archons of each sphere, the challenges they'll present, the responses that grant passage. By the time you reach biological death, you've essentially been training for that final journey your entire life. And here's the crucial point. The journey after death is described in the texts as very similar to the journey during deep sleep. Both involve consciousness loosening from material anchoring and passing through multiple levels of reality. The difference is that after death, there's no silver cord pulling you back to the body. You continue ascending unless you're stopped. This means that the Dreamgate practice isn't just about sleeping better in this life. It's training for navigating the post-death states. Every night you successfully seal your Dreamgate and maintain sovereignty in the dream realm, you're practicing the very skills you'll need for the ascent. You're learning to recognize archonic intrusion, to speak words of power, to maintain your energetic integrity while passing through hostile territory. You're training for the escape. This is why the archons attack monad carriers so persistently in dreams specifically. They're not just farming your fear energy in the present. They're trying to prevent you from developing the skills you'll need for the ascent. If you spend your entire incarnation being terrified and dominated in the dream state, you'll arrive at death with no capacity to navigate this post-death journey. You'll be turned back at the first archonic challenge, forced to reincarnate, and the whole cycle continues. But if you've spent years successfully sealing your dream gate, navigating the dream realm with sovereignty, recognizing archonic entities and knowing how to protect yourself from them, you'll arrive at death prepared. You'll recognize the challenges you encounter as structurally similar to dreams you've already mastered. You'll speak the words of power you've been practicing for years, and you'll pass through the archonic spheres to the pleroma, completing the escape. This is the stakes of the practice. This is why it matters. This is why learning a simple 3-word technique for sleeping better is actually learning the password for escaping the cosmic prison. Everything connects. The small practice contains the large pattern. Sealing your dream gate in physical life is training for sealing yourself against archonic challenges after death. The Gnostics understood this. Jesus taught Mary these techniques not just to help the disciples sleep better, but to prepare them for the ascent they'd eventually make. Now let's discuss integration with daily life. Because spiritual practice doesn't exist in a vacuum. You still have jobs, relationships, responsibilities, challenges. How does the dream gate sealing affect and integrate with your ordinary life? First, the most immediate and obvious effect is that you'll have more energy. When you're not being attacked nightly, when you're actually sleeping restoratively, that you wake with genuine energy instead of dragging yourself through the day depleted. This affects everything. Your work performance improves, your patience with difficult people increases, your capacity to handle stress expands. You're operating from a full tank instead of running on fumes, and that changes how you move through the world. Second, your relationship to fear shifts. Once you've successfully protected yourself from archonic dream attacks, once you've proven to yourself that you can take action against hostile non-physical forces and succeed, fear loses its paralytic power. You still feel fear. It's a natural human emotion, but you're no longer controlled by it. When challenges arise, your default response isn't panic or freeze, it's, what's the technique for this? What's the practice that addresses this? You've moved from helpless victim to active agent, and that shift affects every domain of your life. Third, your capacity for discernment increases dramatically. Discernment is the ability to distinguish between what's genuine and what's illusory, what's helpful and what's harmful, what's true and what's deceptive. When you're chronically depleted from nightmare attacks, your discernment is impaired. You don't have the energy to think clearly or the stability to trust your intuition. But when you're rested and protected, discernment sharpens. You notice manipulation tactics that you would have missed before. You recognize when someone's draining your energy versus genuinely connecting with you. You see through the illusions and half-truths that saturate consensus reality, this enhanced. Discernment protects you from many forms of exploitation, not just spiritual exploitation, but material exploitation too. Fourth, your relationships naturally shift. Some relationships deepen and become more genuine. These are the relationships based on authentic connection rather than energy exchange. But other relationships deteriorate or end. These are the relationships that were actually parasitic, where the other person was unconsciously or consciously feeding on your energy. When you seal your dream gate and stop being a passive energy source, energy vampires lose interest in you or become overtly hostile, and the relationship ends. This can be painful, especially if the relationship was with family members or long-standing friends, but it's ultimately necessary. You can't wake up while maintaining relationships that depend on you staying asleep. Fifth, your relationship to work and money may change. If your job is soul-crushing but economically necessary, you'll probably continue doing it for now, but your attitude toward it shifts. You recognize it as a temporary necessity, not your identity. You begin looking for exit strategies, developing skills that could lead to different work, reducing expenses so you're not trapped by financial need. you understand that the economic system itself is an archonic mechanism designed to extract life force in exchange for survival, and you look for ways to minimize your participation in that exchange. Some practitioners report that after sealing their dream gate and reclaiming their energy, unexpected opportunities appear, job offers they didn't seek, creative projects that generate income, inheritances, or windfalls that reduce financial pressure. This isn't magic. It's that when you're operating from a full energetic state rather than a depleted one, you naturally attract different circumstances and make different choices that lead to better outcomes. Sixth, your spiritual practice deepens and expands. The dream gate sealing is often people's first successful esoteric practice. It proves that this stuff actually works, that you're not just playing spiritual dress-up or indulging in comforting fantasies. Once you've proven one practice works, you have confidence to try others. You might begin studying Gnostic texts seriously. You might develop a daily meditation practice. You might learn energy work or shamanic journeying or contemplative prayer. The dream gate sealing opens a door, and what you find beyond that door is an entire landscape of spiritual techniques and knowledge that actually function. Let me share some practitioner testimonies because hearing others' experiences can help you navigate your own. These are anonymized but accurate reports from people who've used the dream gate sealing successfully. Practitioner 1, a 34-year-old woman. I'd had intense nightmares my entire life. Multiple times a week I'd wake up terrified, sometimes screaming. I tried therapy, I tried medication, nothing helped. I found the dream gate technique online and was skeptical but desperate. The first 2 nights my sleep was noticeably more peaceful. Then nights 3 and 4 were the worst nightmares I'd ever experienced. Being chased, attacked, scenarios of absolute terror. I almost stopped, but I remembered the instruction that escalation means it's working. I continued through night 7, and on day 8 I woke up feeling different, lighter, like something that had been sitting on my chest for 34 years was gone. That was 8 months ago. I haven't had a single nightmare since, not one. My whole life has changed because I'm finally getting actual rest. Practitioner 2, a 41-year-old man. I used to experience sleep paralysis 2 or 3 times a month. I'd wake up unable to move, sensing a dark presence in the room, feeling absolute terror. Doctors told me it was just a neurological quirk, nothing to worry about. But I knew something was actually there. After I sealed my dream gate, the sleep paralysis stopped immediately. And about 3 weeks later I had a dream where Jesus appeared and taught me additional protection techniques. I'd never had a dream like that before. It was clearly teaching, not just random dream content. I've realised that once I cleared out the archonic interference, my actual spiritual guidance could come through. Practitioner 3, a 28-year-old non-binary person. I was raised atheist and thought all spiritual stuff was nonsense, but I was having such bad nightmares that I was afraid to sleep. A friend sent me the dream gate technique. I figured I had nothing to lose. I didn't believe in Archon or Jesus or any of it, but I did the practice anyway. By night 7, the nightmares had stopped. I still don't know if I believe in the metaphysics, but I can't deny that the technique worked. I sleep peacefully now. That's evidence enough for me. Practitioner 4, a 55-year-old woman. I'm a lifelong Christian, and when I first encountered the Gospel of Mary and Gnostic texts, I was nervous about heresy, but I was so tired of being exhausted, and my pastor's advice to pray harder wasn't helping. I did the dream gate sealing while asking Jesus to protect me if this was somehow wrong. The practice worked. My sleep became restful, and I didn't feel any conflict with my faith. I just felt like I'd found a piece of Jesus' teaching that had been lost. I still go to church, I still pray, but now I also have this practical technique that actually helps. I wish the church taught this openly instead of hiding it. Practitioner 5, a 19-year-old male. I'm in college, and I thought the nightmares were just from stress, and anxiety. After sealing my dream gate, I realised it wasn't stress. I was being attacked. Once the attack stopped, my actual stress and anxiety decreased dramatically because I wasn't operating from constant exhaustion. My grades improved, my social life improved, everything got better from this one simple practice. These testimonies show the range of people who benefit from the practice. Different ages, different belief systems, different levels of previous spiritual involvement. The common thread is that they all experience nightmares or sleep disruption. They performed the 7-night protocol despite challenges, and they achieved lasting relief. Your experience will be your own, but the pattern is remarkably consistent across practitioners. Now let's talk about what to do if the practice doesn't seem to work for you. You've completed the 7 nights, but you're still experiencing nightmares or sleep paralysis. First, verify that you performed the practice correctly. Were you speaking the words aloud in conversational volume? Were you actually feeling vibration in your throat? Were you maintaining the practice for 7 consecutive nights, not missing any nights? Were you sleeping in your sleeping position when you performed the protocol, not hours before bed? If any of these elements were missing, your seal didn't complete. You need to start over with full attention to the instructions. Second, consider whether you're dealing with something other than archonic attack. Not all nightmares are archonic. Some nightmares are trauma processing, your psyche working through unresolved experiences. Some are medication side effects. Some are the result of sleep disorders that require medical treatment. The Dreamgate sealing specifically addresses archonic intrusion. If your nightmares have different causes, the practice won't eliminate them, though it may reduce them by removing one layer of the problem. Third, consider whether there's a more fundamental energetic problem that needs addressing before the seal can hold. If you're living in an environment saturated with hostile energy, abusive relationship, toxic workplace, energetically contaminated living space, your entire energy field may be so compromised that a localized seal on the Dreamgate isn't sufficient. You may need to address the broader energetic situation first. This could mean leaving the abusive relationship, changing jobs, or cleansing your living space with sage, salt, and intentions before attempting the Dreamgate sealing again. Fourth, consider whether you need a more robust version of the practice. For some people, the 3 Aramaic words alone aren't enough. They need to combine the Dreamgate sealing with additional protection practices, placing protective symbols around the bed, calling on divine protection explicitly, using crystals or talismans, employing visualization techniques. The core Dreamgate practice works for most people, but some individuals are under such heavy attack that they need multi-layered defense. If you've done everything correctly and you're still experiencing attacks, don't despair. It means you're one of the individuals who needs the advanced protocol, not that you're somehow broken or that the practice doesn't work. The advanced protocol involves expanding the practice beyond the throat to include the other major energetic gates. There are actually 7 primary gates where consciousness interfaces with external energies. The dream gate at the throat is the most important for sleep protection, but the other gates, crown, third eye, heart, solar plexus, sacral and root, can also be vulnerable, especially in individuals under sustained attack. The advanced protocol is, before performing the throat seal, you seal each of the other gates starting from the root and moving up. You place your hand on each location and speak a variation of the 3 words appropriate to that gate. For the root, Eshmak Kayam Shilama, named I stand sealed. For the sacral, Eshmak Kaya Shilama, named I live sealed. For the solar plexus, Eshmak Kila Shilama, named I hold sealed. For the heart, Eshmak Kuva Shalama, named I love sealed. For the third eye, Eshmak Chazi Shalama, named I see sealed. For the crown, Eshmak Ekad Shalama, named I unite sealed. Finally, for the throat, Eshmak Nure Shalama, the original 3 words. This full protocol takes about 5 minutes and creates a complete energetic sealing from root to crown. It's rarely necessary. Most people only need the throat seal, but for individuals under heavy sustained attack, the full protocol provides comprehensive protection. You would perform this complete sealing nightly for 7 nights, and then maintain it weekly just as you would the simple throat protocol. Now let's address the question of children and the dream gate sealing, because parents frequently ask whether their children can or should use this practice. Children are naturally more vulnerable to archonic attack than adults, for several reasons. First, children's energy fields are less developed and less defined. The boundaries between self and other are porous. This openness serves developmental purposes. Children need to be receptive to learning and social bonding, but it also creates vulnerability to hostile energies. Second, children spend more time in altered states of consciousness. They move fluidly between imagination and reality, between waking and dreaming. This fluidity is developmentally appropriate, but it means their dream gates are more open more of the time. Third, children who are monad carriers often remember their divine origin more clearly than adults. They haven't been fully indoctrinated into consensus reality yet. They might talk about previous lives, about not belonging here, about wanting to go home to a place that isn't this world. This makes them threats to the archonic system even more than adults, because they haven't yet forgotten what they are. The archons attack children aggressively to create trauma early that will suppress spiritual awareness for the rest of the incarnation. If your child is experiencing frequent nightmares, night terrors, resistance to going to sleep, or talking about scary things in their room at night, archonic attack should be considered as a possible cause. Obviously, rule out medical issues, make sure the child's basic needs are being met, address any environmental stressors. But if nightmares persist despite reasonable interventions, the Dreamgate practice may help. For children under about age 7, you perform the practice on their behalf. After they're in bed and beginning to fall asleep, you sit beside them, place your hand gently on their throat and speak the 3 words for them. Eshmak Nure Shalama. You can explain what you're doing in simple terms. I'm saying special words to keep bad dreams away. The child doesn't need to understand the theology or cosmology. They just need to know you're protecting them. You perform this for 7 consecutive nights and then maintain it weekly. Most parents report that their children's nightmares cease within the 7-night period, and the children begin sleeping peacefully and waking, rested. For children between 7 and 12, you can teach them to perform the practice themselves, with your guidance. You explain that bad dreams are caused by mean, invisible things that come when we sleep, but there are special words that make a shield to keep them away. You teach them the 3 words phonetically, Eshmak Nure Shalama, and show them how to place their hand on their throat and speak the words before sleep. You do it to Wes for the first few nights so they learn the pattern. Then you transition to them doing it independently while you observe. Eventually they can perform it on their own. This builds their sense of spiritual agency while providing the protection they need. For teenagers, you can teach the practice and provide more context. Teenagers are capable of understanding that there are hostile non-physical forces, that the material world isn't what it appears to be, and that they have tools to protect themselves. In fact, many teenagers are hungry for this kind of knowledge because they're at the developmental stage where they're questioning authority and seeking authentic understanding. Providing them with a dream gate practice and some basic Gnostic cosmology can be profoundly empowering at an age where they're trying to figure out who they are and what this world is about. The key with teenagers is to present the information without dogma. Share what you know and what has worked for you, but make it clear they're free to test it and draw their own conclusions. Teenagers resist being told what to believe, but they're very open to being given tools and knowledge they can experiment with themselves. Teaching children and teenagers the Dream Gate sealing serves multiple purposes beyond just improving their sleep. It teaches them that they're not powerless victims of circumstances. It shows them that spiritual techniques actually work when properly applied. It gives them direct experience of non-physical realities and forces, and it begins their training in the practices they'll need for the eventual ascent. If you can raise a child who understands from early age that they're a divine spark trapped temporarily in matter, that they have tools to protect themselves from hostile forces, and that their ultimate goal is to escape this cosmos and return to their true home, you've given them an enormous advantage. They won't have to spend decades unlearning false programming. They'll start from a foundation of truth. Let's talk about community and finding others who practice this path, because spiritual practice in isolation is significantly harder than practice in community. The Gnostic path has always been a path of small groups rather than mass movements. Jesus taught his inner circle. They taught others. Those others taught their students. The transmission was always personal, relational, selective. This pattern continues today. There isn't a central Gnostic church you can join. There are no official organizations. What exists are small communities of practitioners connected through study, practice, and shared understanding. Finding these communities requires some effort. Online spaces exist. Forums, social media groups, Discord servers, where people discuss Gnostic texts and practices. Some of these spaces are valuable. Others are filled with spiritual bypassing, fantasy, and people who are more interested in feeling special than doing the actual work. Discernment is necessary. Good indicators of a genuine Gnostic community are focus on practice rather than just theory, willingness to question and debate rather than groupthink, emphasis on direct experience rather than received authority, and absence of guru worship or cult dynamics. If you find a community where people share practices, report results honestly, help each other troubleshoot when practices don't work, and maintain healthy skepticism while remaining open to genuine spiritual experience, you found something valuable. In-person communities are rarer but more powerful. Some cities have Gnostic study groups or churches that meet regularly. The Ecclesia Gnostica and similar organizations maintain physical congregations in various cities. These groups vary widely in quality and approach. Some are deeply rooted in practice and mysticism. Others are more about intellectual study and historical interest. Visit if you can and assess whether the community resonates with your needs. The ultimate value of community isn't just support and learning, though both are important. The ultimate value is confirmation. When you're exploring non-consensus reality, when you're having experiences that mainstream culture dismisses as delusion, when you're practicing techniques that most people have never heard of, also having others who share those experiences and practices confirms that you're not crazy. You're not making it up. This is real. Other people are walking this path. Other people are having the same experiences. Other people have the same understanding. That confirmation is psychologically and spiritually crucial, especially in the early stages of awakening when doubt and confusion are constant companions. However, community also carries dangers. The danger of groupthink, where the community's consensus becomes a new form of dogma and individual experience gets suppressed if it doesn't fit the group narrative. The danger of spiritual materialism, where community membership becomes an identity and source of ego rather than genuine practice. The danger of parasitic relationships within the community, where energy vampires and narcissists pose as spiritual seekers. The danger of cultish dynamics developing around charismatic individuals who claim special knowledge or authority. These dangers are why the Gnostic path emphasizes direct personal gnosis over received teaching. No teacher, no community, no text has authority over your direct experience. If your experience contradicts what you're being taught, trust your experience. Teachers and communities can guide, suggest, share what has worked for them, but they cannot tell you what is true. Only gnosis, direct knowing, can do that. The Dreamgate ceiling is your first test of this principle. Don't believe it works because I'm telling you it works, or because ancient texts say it works, or because other practitioners report it works. Test it yourself, perform the 7-night protocol properly and observe the results. Then you'll know directly, through your own experience, whether this teaching is valid. That direct knowledge is gnosis, and it's worth more than any authority's word. We're approaching the end of this teaching transmission, and I want to leave you with some final perspectives and encouragements. The path of Gnostic awakening is not easy. It's not meant to be easy. You're attempting to escape from a cosmic prison system that has been refining its containment strategies for aeons. You're fighting against not just individual archonic entities, but against the entire structure of material reality, which is designed to keep consciousness trapped and asleep. The odds are not in your favour. Most incarnated monad carriers never wake up. They live, they suffer, they die, and they reincarnate within the system, never realising there's an escape. The fact that you found this teaching, that you're reading or hearing these words right now, means you're one of the few who has the potential to break free. That's not empty chosen one rhetoric. It's a simple statistical observation. Out of billions of incarnated humans, only a tiny fraction ever encounter genuine Gnostic teaching, and an even smaller fraction act on it. You've encountered it. Now the question is whether you'll act on it. The Dreamgate ceiling is your first action. It's a small practice, simple enough that you can begin tonight. But small practices have large implications. By sealing your Dreamgate, you're declaring sovereignty over your own consciousness. You're refusing to be farmed. You're taking the first step toward escape. That first step matters enormously because it breaks the spell of helplessness. Once you've proven to yourself that you can take effective action against archonic forces, once you've demonstrated that you're not powerless, the entire trajectory of your incarnation shifts. You move from victim to agent, from asleep to awakening, from trapped to escaping. The journey from first awakening to complete liberation typically takes years, sometimes decades. This isn't a weekend workshop enlightenment. This is sustained practice, study, gnosis and transformation over the course of an entire lifetime. But every step matters. Every practice you master is one more tool in your escape kit. Every piece of knowledge you verify through direct experience is one more bar removed from your prison. The Dreamgate ceiling removes one bar. There are many others to address, but each one you remove makes the whole structure weaker until eventually you can simply walk out. Don't be discouraged by how much there is to learn and do. You're not meant to do it all at once. You're not meant to have all the knowledge immediately. This is a path of gradual awakening, where each insight leads to the next. Each practice makes the next practice possible. Trust the process. Do the practice in front of you now, seal your Dreamgate, and trust that when you're ready for the next practice, it will present itself. The monad within you is guiding this journey, even when your conscious mind is confused or frustrated. Your higher self knows the way home. Your job is to trust that guidance. Take the next step that's shown to you and keep walking. Some final practical reminders. Start tonight. Don't wait for the perfect conditions or until you've read more or until you feel ready. If you're experiencing nightmare attacks or sleep disruption, you need this protection now. Begin this 7-night protocol tonight before you sleep. Track your experience. Keep a simple journal noting each night's dreams or sleep quality. This helps you recognize patterns and confirms the practice's effectiveness. Be patient with yourself during the escalation period. Nights 3 through 5 are hard for most people. Remember that the difficulty is confirmation, not failure. The practice is working when it gets worse before it gets better. Maintain the practice after the initial 7 nights. Weekly reinforcement keeps the seal strong and reminds you of your sovereignty. Share the practice with others who need it, but share wisely. Don't force it on skeptics or the people who aren't ready. Offer it to those who are genuinely seeking and suffering. Continue your education. The Dreamgate sealing is one practice from one text. There are many other Gnostic texts and practices to explore. Keep learning, keep testing, keep growing. Trust your direct experience over any authority. If something works for you, use it regardless of whether it's orthodox. If something doesn't work, discard it regardless of how many people say it should work. And remember always, you're not crazy, the nightmares aren't random, the exhaustion isn't your fault. The sense of being attacked is accurate perception. You're a divine spark trapped in matter, and hostile forces are trying to keep you trapped. But you have tools, you have knowledge, you have the capacity to protect yourself and ultimately to escape. The Dreamgate sealing is your first tool. Use it well and may it serve your liberation.